Okay, folks. Well, as everybody knows, I think I'm Fred Harland, and this is Richard Clarke doing hot science here. And we have a lot of interesting things to discuss that Richard prepared, and here they are. His first one for the top story is saying the capitalism, our way of doing economics, is in crisis, and to save our economics, we need to rethink economic growth. For our coronavirus story, we're talking about the rise of Zoom towns in the rural West. That sounds interesting. For technology, a thing that a lot of people have been worried about is, should you own your own data rather than somebody else? And if you did, maybe you could then sell it if the price was right. For our material story, we talked an awful lot about graphene over the next while, and apparently doing some funny things like stacking and twisting unlocks a rare form of magnetism. For our flight and physics story, can we deflect an asteroid? What's happening around that? And now, a big idea for environment and energy. How about this? People coming up with 50 million pounds, 1 million each, to the 50 best ideas to save the planet. Any takers?
It looks like Fred's connection is interrupted for a moment. And so the next story was about birds share food with other birds. So humans aren't the only critters that are nice to other ones. And Fred's back now.
Oh, I'd gone, had I? All right. Anyway, what do you think about life? If one species will take care of another. Of course, we know the dogs take care of us, so maybe that's not all that unusual, but apparently that does happen. Our human story, the question is, how robust are your networks to support you as you get older? Apparently, that's very, very important. And then for our health and final story, even any exercise, even just standing, has a real health gain if you mainly sit during the day. So how much are you getting? So back to Richard. What's this about needing to rethink economic growth if we want to sustain capitalism and our economy?
Well, some of us who have been kind of politically radical all their life are not surprised by this story. It turns out, excuse me, while I'm trying to do something to make my picture show up. I don't know what I did. I disappeared. Here I am. Okay. I got it going now. I thought I had it going. Anyway, even before this pandemic and capitalism was in trouble, unfettered free markets have pushed inequality of income and wealth to extraordinarily high levels around the world, and slow productivity growth has plagued many rich companies for really a long time, and it stunted opportunities for a whole generation. And then came along the pandemic, with millions of people losing their job in the raging wildfire fires destroying the West. And all of these things are signs of a dysfunctional economic system that suddenly these signs became really evident with the uh, pandemic. Uh, Now, there have been people talking about and questioning the underpinnings of capitalism for a long time. There was a movement, for example, in the 70s, which was a degrowth movement. And they were saying you can't have an economy that's based on growth forever. That just doesn't work. And uh, then now we even see political movements who are involved in this. Here's a quote from Greta Thunberg. She says, quote, "And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?" says Greta. And faced with climate change and the financial struggle of many workers, capitalism just isn't getting it done. And now, economists, it was written recently by some MIT economists that the growth really ended, they said, on October 16th, 1973. And that was when the OPEC oil embargo was announced. And ever since then, both in America and in Europe, the growth that were happening have never fully recovered from the oil embargo 50 years ago. And some people say that this slower growth is a result of lower birth rates. And now they really feel like there's a disconnect between the GDP, which we've measured ourselves by for pretty much all of my life, and the conditions in the world. Here, another economist says, you can churn out all the GDP you want, but if suicide rates go up and depression rates go up and the rate of children dying before they're 4 years old goes up, it's not the kind of society you want to build. So we have these people who are now saying maybe we don't need growth at all. Some are saying we need self-aware growth, not growth at any cost. And this is a problem that is going to face us really for the rest of our life and for the lives of our children and grandchildren. The world's economy is not growing the way it was when we were young, and probably it never will again, because birth rates are going to start to slow down around the world. And what do? Do we worship at the altar of perpetual growth, or do we find some other way? It's up to you guys.
Well, let me suggest something. I am familiar with, and maybe Johannes is with socialism. I think that we should work on a modified form of socialism where people get compensated according to what they contribute to society, but where we're all, I wrote it down, we're all free from worry where our next meal is coming from, and whether we have a roof over our head. In other words, I suggest that everyone should automatically have a guaranteed income, starting maybe at the age of 18. And, so it doesn't have to cover necessarily any great luxuries, but at least the minimum. So that way everyone can develop the way they want to, and actually the idea of having to make money will be secondary to, for instance, an artistic expression of some sort. And so anyway, so I would suggest that we start it at age 18 or earlier, circumstances dictate. Like for instance, a kid that has no parents. Income above the minimum should be taxed, and that should be taxed in proportion to the amount of income you have. And obviously it should be used to pay only for the service that only the government can provide efficiently. In other words, healthcare and education and physical protection, from foreign and domestic dangers, things of that sort, infrastructure and education. So that's a lot of money, but I think if all of us, are working to the best of our ability, the income will be sufficient to cover all of that. So this for-profit stuff, we should get rid of that. And so anyway, a lot of other things we can talk about, but one of the things that I think is necessary is that we should get people to agree that we should educate kids from grade school on up, and political education should continue as long as you're in school, and then still through television and what have you, that can continue. And so that people want to contribute to the political system and be active rather than having all these companies or these groups keep begging for money, and then advertising companies getting on the idea of people voting their conscience. So anyway, that's some of the things I was thinking of.
Okay, thank you,
John?
John. Anybody else?
Yeah, a question for John is, I'm enormously sympathetic to what he says, but I think it only really works very, very well if the whole globe is included. And we're not simply talking about rich countries. And then it becomes a question of how do you ever work towards that? I can see how in Canada it might very well start working over the next decade, but we don't have a way of controlling what happens in Ghana or in India or in China. Do you think this is at all feasible at a global level?
Well, we have, for instance, the World Health Organization. That's one place where the whole globe supposedly is working together. Of course, the United States, in our wisdom, elected this idiot called Trump, and who first stepped us to get out of that, and which is very typical for capitalism, really, because capitalists will not share. I mean, that is anathema to them. They just cannot share. They will cheat and do anything they can to gather money and wealth for themselves. But I think that using the WHO as an example, and then there was the United Nations and so on, and I think from there we could work that out eventually to evolve the whole world.
Any other thoughts?
I think that growth is important, and maybe money is a tool we can use. But there's already in Europe, like the Scandinavian countries, where you pay just about half of your income in taxes, which helps others. And if we can expand that to the world, helping those countries, show them how they can help themselves through technology and better governments, I think it's possible.
Yeah, well, like I said, I grew up in Holland, and I was 23 when I came to the United States quite by accident. But I worked under that system, and I still talk to my younger brother, and they complain about a lot of things, but not the complaints are totally different from what we have. Homelessness is something that is, nobody understands what that is, and so I think they call it pragmatic socialism, and I think that's the way to go.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, can you hear me, folks? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can hear you.
My name is Vijay Nilekani, and I'm calling from Wilmington, Delaware. And I've been on Richard's distribution now for about a year, and I've spent some time in Ajijic, and I'm planning to move there hopefully long term. My view is that is much more basic. I think humans are ultimately we are primates, and we are driven by biological instinct, survival, and so on. And the market economy is based on fear and hope and greed and all these things. And I think these are very deep down drivers that are not going to change very easily. So we can theorize on how to tweak it or make it moderate it and so on. But I think greed and fear drive the US economy and the global economy to some degree. And throw in layers of politics and other things, it gets very complex.
Now, Vijay, I've spent, one of the things I've studied all my life is anthropology. And one of the things that really shows up that is special about humans is how well we cooperate, and humans cooperating with other humans. If you read the research, it goes deep. It's like instinctive behavior. There are brain behaviors, chemical reactions in the body that are based on that. And I think we have taken a wrong way somehow because we're not using our innate ability to cooperate with each other.
I would agree with that within limits. But I mean, this is a complicated subject that
Yes,
we
indeed.
devote a lot of time to. But I was just commenting on an idealistic utopia that we can certainly work towards it. And I do admire. I'm a huge admirer. I lived in Canada for 10 years and United States for 40 years, and I was born in India. And I can say that I'm a huge admirer of Canada and particularly the Scandinavian countries. And nowadays, Taiwan and South Korea and all are very impressive societies. And the question is, how do you leverage that to make the whole planet like that?
Now, as you said, it's a fairly complicated question. And I suppose if we're to try to get to the bottom of it, we wouldn't be able to time to talk about any of the other items.
That's right.
Move on to coronavirus?
And that's the reason why I had this as the top story was just exactly the discussion we had. So anyway, coronavirus, there's a new thing. One of the things that I continue to highlight with coronavirus are the changes that this is bringing, to society. And so this article really captured my interest, and they call it the rise of Zoom towns in the rural West. And let me get rid of that screen for a moment and just anyway, with what the Zoom towns are about is as the coronavirus started, then these towns that are called gateway communities that are in the entrance point to national parks and things like this. These gateway towns first went through a collapse when tourism collapsed. And then after that, something strange started to happen. And that is all these people from the cities who now can work at home using the internet started moving into all these beautiful places. And now there is this influx of new residents that most of these places cannot handle. They have small, poor governments and are just barely able to handle what they have now. And then they have a bunch of new problems. And you have these, what are by their standards, rich people moving in from the outside, driving up housing prices, causing traffic congestion, and turning what was a beautiful place into a place that's not so beautiful anymore. And they're afraid that in these places, people love these places, but they're afraid they're going to be loved to death. And uh, so it's a different kind of problem, and it's a problem that these communities are not prepared to move to deal with. And part of that problem, we were talking about it before with the economy, is this enormous inequality of wealth because somebody moves to some little town in Idaho, say, and he's making the kind of money that he used to make when he was in Silicon Valley or Seattle. And it turns out the new guys have all the money also. And so, again, it's a problem. And things change, and we'll see how this one goes.
Any thoughts?
I think we're
Richard,
talking about. Okay.
I have my hand up. Richard,
Yes.
it's you were describing Ajijic like a few seconds ago, with people moving in and raising the price of housing, raising and the traffic. So it's happening here too, but for a different reason, but it sounds the same. Probably
Right.
the same effect, right?
Yes, similar thing, but here it was happening longer than just the pandemic. So we've been a Zoom town before there was Zoom.
True.
But maybe with the implications of the pandemic, or maybe of the November election, we'll get more and more of these people coming in and exacerbate what's already been going on. Is that likely?
Oh my God, I'm sure they think about it.
That's right. If the election turns out in an unexpected way, like the last one did, we had an influx of people coming into Ajijic after the last presidential election. And I think if it goes the same way, we'll have a bigger influx this time.
Well, people say they're going to move to Canada, but I think they find out and they change their mind. So they'll probably come down here.
You know, the other thing too is I know there are other complicated scenarios because I have friends in Facebook, young relatives who are much younger and want to move to these kind of Zoom towns. And there is a lot of resistance from the company and the state because the state is losing state tax revenues and things like that because they're filing taxes as from say Seattle, some small town in Washington state where there's no income tax, but they're working in for a San Francisco company. So there's a lot of issues that are not yet resolved. And recently I remember Facebook passing an internal policy that they will not permit them to go for long durations to leave the San Francisco area.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be internal constraints and restraints from the overall ecosystem.
But recently, Microsoft announced that they're going to make this remote working a permanent part of their culture.
Yeah, right.
Remote working, but not remote relocating to other cities and states because they're getting pressure from the state governments.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think also that it's something of a temporary problem because while the companies are very willing to allow this to happen right now, they're not going to allow it for every employee, as time goes on and as they are able to make use of the buildings that they've already put large investments into and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, there'll be a shaking out of it somewhat. Also, I think the people who have moved and who want to continue to be there, they're going to have to get involved in the community. I mean, nobody wants to
Maybe.
sit in front of their computer working for their company a couple thousand miles away or whatever their whole life. I think they want to be involved with what's going on, and they'll have to learn how to get along and how to sort of work the, make the community better.
Right, I think you're right.
But it's a
But it
long
does seem to make possible a certain kind of freedom about where you live and how you'll do things. If you can still get money, but live somewhere else, how do you decide? And might it not be a much more enjoyable life for many people?
It could
Absolutely.
be. Now, there's still another part to this question, and that is if Microsoft can have remote workers working anywhere in the world, then why can't they start having remote workers in places like Kenya, where they speak English, and the Kenyan wages are a lot cheaper than the wages in Seattle or even the wages in Bangalore, India?
Sure.
You know, I'm just talking from my own experience looking at my kids. I have 3 sons, and the oldest is a software designer, and at the company that he works with, the headquarters are in Miami, but he lives in Lansing, Michigan, and my son that is, I forgot exactly 8 or 9 people that help him do some of the writing for the software. And most of the people, there are 2 of them that live in the United States, but there's 1 in Sri Lanka, and about 3 I know in India, 1 in London. That is also an Indian person, it's a lady. But her husband is a diplomat, and he was put into the embassy in London. So his wife went with, and that's why there's somebody in London too. But what I'm trying to say is that what you're saying is not a new phenomena. Right. It's something that, my son is not exactly a youngster anymore. He's approaching 60. And so, but this has been going on, and he's once in a great while, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, he may just go and visit them in person, just to see that he's a warm body too. Other than that, everything goes electronic. And then my other son does something for insurance companies. He had a large company. He merged with another one, and so, but this too, everything is electronic essentially, and so everyone works from his own home. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, Bristol Myers, for a very long time, and I too worked, as an outdoor salesman, really, from my own home. And so, I mean, the idea of going to work in an office, I've never known. And I'm approaching 90 now, but so it's not exactly a new phenomenon.
But what is new is the coronavirus looks like an inflection point, and an inflection point is where you have change happening, and then suddenly it starts happening at a lot faster rate. And certainly working out of the office, especially for sales guys, has been a thing. As long as there have been outside sales, there have been salesmen living outside. But so it's been going on for a long time, but this is an inflection point. There are more people able to do it, and it's just, we're seeing the beginnings of a different kind of change in society, I think.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the finances. I'm in Queens, New York, which is close to Brooklyn, which is close to Manhattan, and of course we've been the epicenter for a while. And it's been sort of funny because lots of the people from the CEOs and everything, of course, wanted to go out to the Hamptons. and the people in the Hamptons didn't want them to come. And I know there's been a lot of people moving around. I know my family have a place down in Florida. And of course, the school's closed, so all the kids went down to Florida. And the neighbors put up a huge fuss and said, we don't want you New Yorkers here. So they left. They left. After 3 days, they left. But one thing that's interesting is anyone I've spoken to, they love working from home. And I think they love the idea of, first of all, the transportation from here to Manhattan is probably, you know, a ton of money, the clothes, the this. So I think there's going to be a lot of resistance going back to the office. And of course, if these places in Manhattan can cut down on their office space, I can sort of see this whole sort of like over the next 5 years or so, a lot of real estate opening up.
And offices are expensive to maintain, like you're talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you can get rid of 20% of your office space, you just cut your overhead significantly.
Yeah.
And a lot of services, though, that service the people who work downtown will go out of business.
Yes.
Yes, big problem.
Actually, there are whole books being written on this topic of a post-pandemic world. Yeah.
Yes,
That's right.
many books.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of a new thing, we've all seen stories about the problem of somebody else getting a hold of your data and using it. Well, should you own it yourself? And if you did, might you sell it if the price was right? I don't know. But why should somebody else own your data? Richard.
Now, this is another interesting subject, I think. And, you know, there is a long-term question. This issue of owning your data is not a new thing. There was actually an initiative that happened a decade ago called Do Not Track, and an organization was trying to get the websites and search engines, browsers, not to track your every activity like Google does. And it died basically because the website owners ignored the rule. And so what's different this time is there's an international consortium of activist groups, companies and software publishers and things like this that have banded together, and they're pushing a movement, what they call global privacy control, where you would own your data. And the thing that is happening now is there are legal changes happening in Europe, and in California recently, they passed a law called the California Consumer Privacy Act, which gives users the right to demand that their data not be used unless they give their permission. So here, California has started a law, and if your data is used without your permission, there you can sue the guys. And this they're trying to do in other countries, and this group with the GPC initiative is working now to pressure more states in the US to follow California's laws. So maybe you can own your own data. Now, I just added the stuff about why can't, if these guys want to pay Google and Facebook and all of this stuff for access to me and my data, why can't I get a piece of it, you know? So anyway.
Any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I don't really give a damn who knows what my data is all about. So I mean, if they want to have it, they can have it, as far as I'm concerned. And I have a feeling that the majority of people don't really care.
Now, there's a lot of use for them having my data. When I go to YouTube, YouTube offers me videos that they think I'll like because they collect my data and they analyze my data. So because of that, I see things that I would never see. How this is going to move, though, is they are working on better and better resources to be able to sell things to you based on your data. And as long as you give them free rein to your data, you're giving the sales computer free rein to try to hustle you into buying their product.
Well,
But
I
there's
think
also an even
I
more
think in this
insidious-
article, didn't they talk about DuckDuckGo, which is a browser that you can search?
Sure.
And I've been using that for years, and you can just go up top and, you just press a button and all your searches are gone.
Right.
I
And
don't know whether that
DuckDuckGo,
really works, but
DuckDuckGo was something that started with this effort a decade ago, the do not track effort. And there were
Mhm.
several browsers like DuckDuckGo
Yeah,
that were
yeah.
created after that. But it still is just a very small thing.
I think, I mean, following what you do to search is, a tiny piece of all the action of how people are watching you and how your data can be used. I think it's interesting that, I mean, the European Union has had workings in this regard for several years now.
Yes.
I mean, individual countries, but also the European Union has a big effort going to not to, well, to allow people to own their own data and to, it's the right to be left alone.
Yes.
And they're pushing that right to be left alone. So.
Now, as an example of the problem, in the last election, we had Cambridge Analytics working with Facebook to be able to identify and target voters to go after in different ways. After the last election, there were legal changes, and that's harder to do. So what did the campaigns do? They started to build their own databases and then enrich it with the data that they can buy about me, and then to use this way of affecting the political choices that people are making in the country. And it's all because the data is freely available that they can do this.
I think it's a promising development that so many different kinds of organizations and individuals and have come together to address this effort. But I think the gains are going to be modest. And I think a great part of what they need to do is to educate the consumer as to what actually is going on and what can be done about it. And also to pursue legal challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we move on to materials, we've talked a little bit about graphene over a while. And I think for some of us, it almost goes over our head. But Richard, why is playing around with graphene and getting a rare form of magnetism important for us? Well, what's this got to do with it?
Now, to start with, I have to apologize with these material stories. I know I have one every week, and many times this is kind of goes over people's head. The reason that I have it to begin with is, things are made from materials. And we're in a stage where they are developing actually new materials with new properties. That means materials that can do things, and you can do things with the material that you've never been able to do before. And so at the forefront of the technological change are these discoveries and developments in material. And so that's why I have these stories, even though, you know, there are things that many of you may struggle with. And so this is this week's story that you're going to have to struggle with. And it turns out for the last 15 years, they discovered graphene recently, basically, only about 15 years ago. And when they discovered it, they saw that it had unique properties. To start with, it was a great, it's the thinnest material known to man, and it's a great conductor of heat and electricity. And then as they've been working with it, they discover there are some unusual things, shall we say, and those unusual things include that, for example, if you have 2 layers of graphene and turn them at just the right magic angle, and then suddenly they become superconductors. And this is a new property, and superconductors would be remarkably useful in the planet. And they've discovered that superconductors is a kind of quantum effect when the one hexagonal pattern lays on another hexagonal pattern and you twist it a little bit more, then you create yet a bigger pattern. And when you do this with these layers of graphene, then the electrons in the thing line up just right to make it a superconductor. And so these researchers wondered about that, and they wondered what would happen if they tried 3 layers. So 2 layers does a bunch of weird stuff. What happens if we try 3 layers and twist them to the magic angles? And they discovered, lo and behold, it does have a bunch of unusual effects, and I won't bother you with all of them. One of them is, you know, carbon, pure carbon is not magnetic, period. But when you get 3 layers and twist them together, then it becomes magnetic, and it becomes magnetic in a different way than we knew that you could make magnetism before. Magnetism comes, it's actually a quantum effect that is due to a property of electrons called spin. And so magnetism is due to spin, but in these stacked graphene environments, you get magnetism, and it's because of a collective swirling motion of the electrons, and they're just doing something that we didn't know they could do, and it has effects that we didn't know. And so here they are just starting to do this kind of experimentation to understand the fundamental properties of this new material. And as they do it, they discover that it can do things that they didn't know were possible. And so out of that will come new technologies. Who knows how they will learn to apply it? But that's this week's story.
Any thoughts?
Yes, I think with this light material, perhaps you can build electrical motors that are very light and very efficient. I don't know, is that possible, Richard?
Oh, it's certainly one of the possibilities that comes out of this, and we'll see.
Anything else? Okay, then on to a physics story that in a sense has been around for an awful long time. We know that things have happened that have been very, very dangerous on this planet when asteroids have struck. Now the question is, and we've been raising it for a while, can we do something about that? And what's this about deflecting an asteroid?
Well, this is another mad scientific scheme. And, you know, we, in the last 40 years, have been exploring space, and we've had about 250 missions that have left the gravity of the Earth and explored then the area around the Earth. And as we have been doing it, one of the things that we discovered is there are all of these rocks flying around. And when we first started to look at this in 1980, we could identify about 10,000 of these rocks. And we thought it was a problem, so the government built systems to start tracking, identifying and tracking them and identifying their orbits and stuff. And right now, we know about 800,000 asteroids, and about 24,000 of the asteroids have orbits that take them close to the Earth. And, you know, if it's an asteroid the size of 500 feet through, when it hits the Earth, it has an impact bigger than the biggest atom bomb. So it's not a small deal. And so they have wondered what they can do about it. And this is the first test about what they can do with it. And they have designed a special mission called DART, D-A-R-T. And DART is going to go up into space next year and going to go to an asteroid and is going to, while it's doing 15,000 miles an hour, gonna collide in the asteroid, and they're gonna carefully measure how much the asteroid moves. And if it moves even a tiny bit, that tiny bit could make the difference between a later asteroid hitting the Earth or not. And so this test really has two parts. One part is just to see if they can do it, run their spaceship into the asteroid and nudge it a little. And then another part is very carefully measuring the effects of the nudge so that later, when they see another asteroid that's going to be a problem, they know how big a spaceship, how much energy you have to put in the asteroid to move it from Earth and destroying all civilization. That's all that this is about. Now, there was also, many of these stories have another side to it. And I have read that some people are talking about this mission as really also a space war mission where the military guys also are interested in what they can do to nudge asteroids. And I don't know why the military would be worried about nudging asteroids, but I don't like it.
You know what, I thought, did I by any chance hear that within the last day or so, they sent something up? They sent something up.
Oh,
I just thought I heard it.
There's a mission to land on an asteroid and scoop some dirt up, and that's been in space for some time, and the actual landing on the asteroid and digging some dirt out is supposed to happen soon.
Okay, that's probably what I heard, because as soon as I read the article, I was like, whoa, they sent it up faster than we thought.
You know, I was wondering, I thought the asteroids, don't they not always travel singularly, but in groups, like 200,000 or so?
This one turns out to be an asteroid that is orbiting another bigger asteroid. So I think that means yes.
So anyway, it seemed like a futile thing to send it to work out a spacecraft and see if you can nudge an asteroid in a different. It doesn't seem that it's very useful for the military if they knew how to have a spacecraft that they could direct, because they could direct it not only to the asteroid.
That's right. We just nudge the asteroid and land on China, and then we don't have to worry about them for a while.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and China is something to worry about because the market has almost completely recovered, whereas Trump and his wisdom, is just about bringing us to the bottom of the of the pit. Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
Any thoughts?
go ahead. Now, saying the last time life was wiped out on the planet was because of an asteroid, right? About 50 million years ago.
There have been, that's happened at least once, yes.
And I think the Gulf of Mexico was created by an asteroid.
That's right. We're grateful for the work.
All right.
Okay. Does anybody have any good ideas for how to save the planet? Well, here's some people who've got a lot of bucks, and you can make some if you have a really, really great idea. What's that all about?
Now, this, occasionally I see things that I think, wow, these guys are working in the right kind of way. If we are going to be saved from this mess that we got ourselves in, we're going to be saved really by new developments and new inventions. And so what this is about is Prince William. You've heard of him, formerly His Highness, and Sir David Attenborough are joining forces and have created a thing that they call the Earthshot Prize. And they've committed 50 million pounds to it. And they're going to hold an open competition, and they're going to select the 5 best ideas that year and give them £1 million. Now, it's not £1 million to go on a vacation to Tahiti. It's £1 million really of seed money to take this idea and to be able to implement it in the world. And they're trying to open it up as wide as they can, because people who have studied inventions and creativity have found that often the most creative answers are from somebody who is not close to the problem. And so they want to get other people involved in this. An example of this is in the 1700s, there was an award in England given out to the first people who could be able to figure out latitude, because that was important in knowing where your ship was. And they had a big prize, and the winner was a clockmaker. And because all of these other people thought that a clockmaker couldn't come up with this kind of ideas, it took him years to get it paid off. Anyway, what they're trying to do is open it up to all of these guys from the very beginning. So if you have a great idea of how to save the planet, this is the time to write it up and submit it, and maybe you'll get £1 million to put it into action. This is real leadership.
Any thoughts?
Well,
I don't know if anyone has any ideas, I'll write it up for you.
Okay. For a piece, for a split. John would do it too for his salesman's commission.
oh yeah, definitely. No, I thought if we were to work out a couple of jet engines and put them somewhere on a mountain, and then turn them on and see if we cannot make the Earth rotate either slower or faster, something like that, and make it change course.
Well, Richard, if we move on from us to other species, is it true that one species of life can really be nice to others? Well, what's that about?
I thought this was a fascinating story, again, especially given some of the conversation that we've had here today about cooperation. And, it turns out people aren't the only ones that can show sympathy to other animals. They used to think that was a unique element of human beings, but then as they've studied it, they see that primates and some other social mammals show this kind of pro-social behavior towards other animals. And what they have discovered here is that birds do it too. And it's interesting, they did these tests with magpies, and they found out that the magpies are paying attention to, like at a feeder, how much the other birds are getting, and if there is some bird that's not getting enough food, they make sure that other bird eats. Now, it turns out an interesting point is they saw in this experiment the case of some birds begging other birds for food, and they saw that the begging behavior increased the food they got, but they saw that even without the begging behavior, the birds still would give food to the underprivileged bird, if it will. And so it wasn't something that was brought on by begging behavior. It's something that is somehow inherent in these animals. And they've looked at it more thoroughly after this, and they see that this behavior happens in species that they call cooperative breeders. And these are species that raise their young together, and in them there is this strong tendency for one animal to help each other. And this, of course, also is the case with humans. We take our children and put them in daycare and schools and they learn this group behavior, and they're raised in these groups. And this is one of the bases for the pro-social behavior of human beings. It's also something that makes me wonder a little bit about this generation of children. I have a granddaughter this year that entered kindergarten, and instead of the socialization that is usual with kindergarten, she's doing it through a computer screen, basically doing the modern version of Zoom schooling. And I wonder, is this generation of children then going to have some kind of handicap because there's a kind of social behavior that is not well developed when you're not around other people? Anyway, that's what I got.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think this behavior is strictly for the birds.
Okay. You've been waiting for that all day, John.
What else?
I had to say that.
Actually, years ago, I read a book called A Parrot's Lament, and it's written by a New York Times journalist, science journalist. And he observes in that book many cases of such behavior among many different species of animals.
Yes. Yes.
It's really interesting. My neighbor has a bird feeder for hummers, and but he also has bats that live in his roof, and so at night or when it gets dark, they come out and they help themselves too, but they're not built the same way as Hummers. So they tilt the whole thing, you know. A lot of the sugar water falls to the ground, and the result is that a huge ant So anyway, to try and explain that one.
So our next story really, in a sense, builds on this. We're talking about altruism. And the question was, how altruistic are your networks? Do you have networks to help you in old age? How robust are they? What's this about having robust networks as you age?
Now, it is, I think that this is a significant story, because if you look at all of the people who have joined this group today, all of us have seen some years. And we're each of us dealing with our version of the growing old and how we're going to deal with this. And one of the things that they have found here, they're starting to study this process well. And this particular study they did in Austria. And what they found there was with people over 65 that were living in single people households, then more than half in Austria of the households over 65 are single person households. And these numbers are rising there. And when you look at people with an increasing age, at 80, about 60% of the women over 80 live alone. About 25% of the men over 80 live alone. And that the thing about the support network that is really critical is there comes a time when you can't take care of yourself. And when you still are better off aging in your own home than going into some kind of institution, but when you can't take care of yourself, that's when you really find out what your needs are from a social network. And what they found out in this situation, that much of the support is given by what they call non-kin networks. These are people you know, often they're from people from some kind of social organization that you were a part of and you were able to befriend. And the much of the support then comes from these non-kin friends that you have. And so that's the kind of problem that we face in our life, is how are we going to get that support as we get older? And it turns out the best way to get that support is from your friends. And the best friends to get it from are friends that know each other and like each other. You have better support there. And, you know, this getting support when you start losing physical capabilities is a real problem, because some people are afraid of the impression that they give on their best friend when the best friend has to wipe them up after going to the bathroom or something like this. So it's an issue, and the best way, I think, for us to deal with the issue is know that we need to be building and maintaining these social networks now while we still have time to do it. Otherwise, when it comes time, there's going to be nobody to take care of you except for professionals.
Any thoughts?
Yes, I think from the times I visited Chapala and Ajijic and the Chapala Society, it's my impression that there is a large and well-built network there. I don't know enough about it to know whether this is true or not. But the other comment I have is, if you have a network of 3 or 4 friends, maybe your own age or a little older, and you depend on them, and they die off or they move away, all of a sudden your network is gone. So having a large network seems to me very important.
Anyone else?
Just if nobody else has anything serious to talk about, I was in a ski lodge back when I was a kid, and we used to plan, being that we're all having so much fun together, maybe when we get older, we'll all live together. And at that point, we had a dentist and we had a nurse and we had a lawyer, which was very important because we were very involved in Vietnam. So people were, things like that. But you know what? I think I'm going to call those folks this week.
Yes, yes.
And see if they're still online.
And Johannes, I agree with what you were saying about this place. With LCS and organizations, then one of the things that happens here is you get to know people and they become your friends. And if you've been here for a while, you start to notice that this support stuff happens, and the people from this friends network then get very actively involved in helping each other out. And, I'm deeply grateful to see that going on. And I think it's one of the reasons why people, when they come here, often age better than they would have done at home, because that same kind of thing is not there in most communities.
So, go ahead.
I think it's really important as you develop this on the spot network to, presumably you have some people back at home or somewhere else, or you have other friends who you care a great deal about who live in other parts of the world anyway. It's really important that you make those people aware of the fact that you have these people there and that they sort of know each other. Because everybody needs to know that you have multiple resources, but that they aren't always on the spot at any given time, and they can help in various ways.
I think that's certainly true.
Yeah. Now, this has been saying that one great way of being supported as you get older is by having friends. But the last story says that one of the best ways of supporting yourself is to move a little bit. What's that all about?
I thought this was interesting because there's always the question of, what amount of exercise, what amount of effort do I have to make to help my health? And it turns out here they have studied this carefully. And if mainly you are sitting during the day, any exercise, even just standing up, has a health gain. And it turns out that there are a lot of older Americans that spend, say, 11 hours a day sitting down. And if they would just figure out how to stand up and be upright for 30 minutes a day, then there's a big increase in health. They looked at population groups, a number of elders and found out that elders who get this kind of minimal physical activity have about a third less medical problems than the ones who just can't get out of the chair. And
Wow.
so it's important to know there's some people, as you get older, you may lose the ability, for example, to walk around. Even for those people to be able to just stand up, then starts to help them recover their health. And so how much exercise do you need? If you can't exercise, then figure out a way to get out of that chair at least half an hour a day, and your health will be better.
Any thoughts?
Well, I didn't know that there were studies done in this regard, but I know that I've been, at least for the last 30 years, I would say, if not longer, every morning when I get up and I go, and part of my routine and washing up and things like that are stretching exercises. The whole program, if you will, take about maybe 10 minutes. I don't think it's more than that. Then I go for 20 minutes on my treadmill. And so like this morning, I walk a mile in 20 minutes. And I mean, that's really, really stepping on it.
That's a pretty good pace.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else?
Makes me feel good. I gotta let my dog in.
That's good. Standing
That
up.
gives him exercise. He had to get out of the chair to get his dog in.
I think
he's-
next
I think I'm gonna take a bike ride right now.
Okay.
next
And
week
what
when we
they
meet, we can all be standing up instead of sitting down.
Yes.
say for us in our age group is what we need is a minimum of about 150 minutes a week of moderate or greater exercise to have kind of a relatively normal level of health. So 50 minutes, 150 minutes a week is a little over 20 minutes a day.
Yeah, I do better than that, but yeah, I would go along with that.
And if you can't do that, just stand up for 20 minutes, and you can do your exercise too. Okay. Now, one of the things Carol started to do recently in the last few days is she's been having some issues with her back, and she now uses most of the time a standing desk where her computer is. So she will stand at her computer or sit in a high chair, and she spends a lot more time doing that than she does sitting down.
All right.
Well, it's much better for your back.
Yeah.
That's what she hopes.
Thanks again. Good session. And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Nice seeing everyone.
Good to see
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay well.
Okay.
I'm gonna shut it down. See you guys.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.